Assalamualaikum dan selamat malam. Sebelum kita mula, boleh perkenalkan diri?
Kejap, sabar dulu. Perkenalkan diri, macam mana mau cakap tu?
Nama?
Nama,
I'm not.
umur.
Mau bagi tahu kerja.
Tidak payah. Nama, umur, sekolah yang pernah diajar. Subjek apa itu saja.
Kalau sekolah menengah lah.
Tak payahlah berapa tahun.
Berapa tahun? Yalah. 6 lah tu, okay.
Okay, boleh.
Jadi cari bahkan habis lah kalau dicari. Okay.
Assalamualaikum dan selamat malam. Sebelum kita mula, boleh perkenalkan diri?
Okay, Assalamualaikum semua. Nama saya Ain Saherah binti Saidun. Saya berumur 26 tahun dan saya pernah mengajar di SMK Benoni Papar.
Terima kasih banyak Cik Ain Syafira kerana sudi meluangkan masa untuk interview ini. Tujuan perbualan kita hari ini adalah untuk meneroka pengalaman Cik dalam menggunakan differentiate instruction dan memahami bagaimana anda menyesuaikan kaedah pengajaran bagi memenuhi keperluan pembelajaran murid yang berbeza-beza. Pandangan dan pengalaman anda amat bernilai untuk tugasan kami serta untuk memahami strategi pengajaran yang lebih berkesan. Interview ini akan berlangsung selama kira-kira 30 hingga 45 minit. Dengan izin Cik, kami ingin merakam perbualan kita supaya kami dapat merekodkan segala pandangan dan jawapan dengan tepat. Saya juga berminat untuk mengetahui lebih lanjut tentang strategi yang anda rasakan paling berkesan, cabaran yang dihadapi dalam melaksanakan pendekatan ini serta bagaimana ia mempengaruhi penglibatan dan pencapaian murid. Boleh saya mulakan soalan yang pertama?
Okay, boleh?
Okey. Okey, Cik. How do you define differentiate instruction and what does it mean in the context of your teaching practice?
Okay. So first of all, I will tell you first and foremost that I do teach English at SMK Benoni Papar. So usually, only English. As of now, I only teach English and also sejarah. But sejarah I don't use English, so that it will be on another note. So for me, differentiated instruction, I will quote on an author. It is, you can say, a model or a guideline for us teachers so that we can address student differences in their readiness, in their interest, and also in learning, with the goal of maximizing the capacity of each learner during a lesson. So in my case, I use differentiated learning when it comes to a class that have different students with different personalities, because not every student, they learn the same way. Some may be an audio learner, some may be a visual learner. Okay, so I use certain different strategies to combat each and every student so that each learner are able to get the most out of the lesson. Okay, that's for question one.
Seterusnya akan diserahkan kepada saya. Saya ingin menanya soalan kedua. What specific strategy do you use to differentiate instruction in the classroom, particularly in terms of contents, process, or the products students create?
It will be different depending on the class that I'm teaching. For example, I teach advanced classes and also low performance classes. So both classes have different types of students. For advanced classes, the minority, usually the minority have trouble in catching up with their peers. So I will only focus on only those minorities. So there's not a lot of strategies that I use in advanced classes. I no need to worry much about them. But for the low performance classes, they have different cliques. So some groups maybe they have a low capacity to retain certain information, meaning that they are slow in catching up with the certain information that are being taught in a lesson. And some groups, they lack attention, so they lose focus very quickly during a lesson, right? So what I do for these low performance classes is I separate them into groups, smaller groups, depending on their personalities, which I do in the beginning of each semester. So in the beginning of each semester, in the beginning of each year, if I do keep all the students in that class till the end of the term, I will do a sort of quiz to to get to know the students, their personality, how do they communicate, for example. So then I will separate them into groups, which is much easier, so that I can focus on those smaller groups. I can teach them, meaning for maybe the more advanced students in the low classes, I do not have to worry all that much, and I can teach them normally, you can say, a normal a rate. So I don't have to be too fast, I don't have to be too slow. For the students who have trouble in focusing during a lesson, then I will try to make certain activities fun or more entertaining, so that they're able to, stay focused during the lesson. Something like that. Yeah.
Thank you, Miss. It is such a wonderful answer. And now we move on to the third question. What is the challenges or barriers that you have encountered when trying to implement differentiated instruction, and how do you address this issue?
Okay. A challenge that I face the most is the students themselves. There are certain students that is very hard to reach them. So I have an experience with one of my student in the low performance class. He is selectively mute, meaning that he chooses to not respond even though he does focus, and when I give tasks, he will do work. However, when I ask for verbal answers or responses, he does not respond. And that is not within my capacity during teaching, actually. So it's very hard for me to reach out to these kinds of students, because it's not that they do not perform well, it's that something that stops them to move forward during maybe conducting an activity. So they can't really communicate well with the students, with their other peers. So when others are already forward, or are already in front of him, he's having trouble catching up, and I can't help him because he the lack of communication, so the lack of responses from him. And that, again, the issue, how I solve it, then there are no other methods but to send him to a more experienced person, for example the counselor, because those types of things are within their scope of experience. And then for troubled students, for example, who decide to act out during lessons, no matter how many strategies I use, how entertaining the lessons I make, but they uh, do not want to interact, do not want to be involved in the lesson. Then again, the only method that I can use is to um, bring in an experienced individual to handle these kinds of personalities, the students' personalities. Yes, that's all.
Okay, move on to number 4. Can you share an example of a time when differentiated instruction was particularly successful in your classroom?
Hmm. The most improvement that I would say I've experienced is with my advanced class, I think. because in my low performance class, there are improvements, but they're slow. However, in my advanced class, even though they're advanced, they do have a problem with performance in the English subject. So that's where what I teach. During their last examination, last year examination, before they moved up a grade, um, their English performance was not that good, basically. So what I did, even though there's only a minority of students that need a much different strategy during lessons, but most of them have trouble in retaining information or have trouble in certain memorizing certain words in the subject. So what I do is make it fun. The English, the topic that I teach each week, I make it more entertaining. I make it different. I make it so that it will be memorable for them. So it is easy for them to retain that information in the next examination. So after the first term, they had their, you can say, midterm exam, and that was when I saw little bits of improvement in their grades, basically. So that was a plus for me.
Thank you, Miss Ain. We move on to our question number 5. How have you seen differentiated instruction impact student engagement and academic achievement, especially among diverse learners?
Hmm. I have not seen other teachers' classes. However, in my case or in my own classes, using differentiated instruction rather than the traditional teaching instruction is much different. In terms of student engagement, the students are more active during activities. They want to be involved. They want to do the lesson, do the activities given because they have fun and they're able to retain the information. And when they go home and then come in the next day or the next lesson, they're able to recite the information that was taught previously because it was memorable for them by using differentiated instruction. It you can say those strategies are in line with how they want to learn. Basically, in a traditional sense, it might be difficult for them due to the lack of diversity. I mean, how can you have fun doing something that you don't like, right? But however, if the thing that you don't like, for example, the subject, you don't like it, but the teacher makes it fun for you, then gradually you will like the subject. So in the future or in the long term, you might not hate it as much and you might be willing to be more interactive during the lesson. And then you will see bits of improvement without you knowing. So in that's for student engagement. For academic achievement, that like I said, you will see bits and pieces of improvement in your grade because of those strategies are in line with how the students want to learn, basically. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Miss Ain. For the last question, what professional development opportunities or resources have been most helpful to you in improving your ability to differentiate instruction?
Okay, so for this question, I think will be the majority is technology. If it was probably 5, 10 years ago, it would be very hard to implement differentiation instruction because of the lack of resources, the lack of materials that a teacher like me can use during classes. But now, because of the implementation of technology, how the Kementerian Pelajaran Malaysia are trying to you know, make technology a necessity in schools, then it's easier for teachers like me to make classes more fun using LCD, using slide presentations, using speakers. And some schools are now willing to give the students rights to use gadgets with supervision during lessons. Some in some areas they can use phones. They can bring phones, but with supervision. Using phones during lesson with the supervision of the teacher, with the permission of the teacher. So it's much easier to diverse lessons during classes. Like for me, even though I used to teach and you can say a more rural part of the area in that school, however, there are LCDs. I can use my phone. There is Wi-Fi, so I was able to use those resources to make my class much more enjoyable for them. Okay, that's all.
Okey, itu sahaja soalan pada kami. Terima kasih banyak Cik Ain Syafira atas kesediaan meluangkan masa dan berkongsi pengalaman serta penghargaan serta pandangan yang sangat berharga. Apa yang anda kongsikan hari ini telah memberi kami banyak wawasan tentang bagaimana differentiated instruction dapat dilaksanakan dengan berkesan di dalam kelas serta cabaran yang perlu dihadapi dalam proses tersebut. Semoga apa yang kita bincangkan hari ini dapat membantu kami dalam menambah baik amalan pengajaran kami dan memperkaya tugasan ini. Terima kasih sekali lagi dan saya berharap semoga Cik terus sukses dalam kerjaya dan usaha mendidik pelajar. Sekian.
Thank you, Miss.